So step 2 of relationship building is to address any perceived weaknesses of your company, product, or service. This lowers risk for your prospect and increases trust. Here's how you do it. You see, risk is the biggest factor in the purchasing decision, and developing trust is the most effective way to minimize risk for your prospects. My recommendation is that you tackle risk head on. Close that door first. Address any perceived weakness of your company honestly and position that perceived weakness as a strength. Then shed some light on the risk monster and use your expertise to slay it. So at this point, it's time to start talking about you and your company. Begin with your company story and highlight relevant strengths. Use what I call duh questions because they're very helpful to get your prospect to agree to your narrative. For example, if you talk about something your company does that's amazing, ask your prospect, does that sound like the kind of company you'd like to deal with? Duh, right? But it gets them to make a positive affirmation that you are in fact the kind of company that they would like to deal with. You have to know what your weaknesses are and you have to prepare for them. For example, don't wait for your prospect to bring up the fact that you're a new company. Prepare to position that as an advantage. I want to share a story with you that illustrates how you can take what seems like a very negative situation and turn it into a positive, but you have to lead with the weakness. In 2007, I had built my company very successfully, and as a result, the local contracting community was not very happy with me. So in March of 2007, I got a letter from the building department. They said they wanted to talk to me about my license. I walk in this room, and it's kind of like a city council meeting. The chairman gavels the meeting to order and immediately asks for what he called an executive session. At that time, I didn't know what an executive session meant, but I noticed very quickly that everyone else started leaving the room. Other homeowners and other contractors, everyone left the room, including the stenographer. So at this point, I started getting a little bit concerned. As everyone's walking out of the room, I started looking at the nameplates in front of all the gentlemen on this panel, and I noticed that they were the names of all of my competitors. I didn't know them personally, but I knew their names. I knew who they were. And I realized, wait a second, the guys that govern my contracting license are the same guys that I've been competing against. And by the way, the people we've been destroying in terms of our competition. We have been taking so much of their business. So I started getting a little bit nervous, and when everybody left the room, the chairman gavels everything again to order, and he says this to me. He said, Mr. Long, we can do this the easy way or the hard way, but you're not going to have a contractor's license here in the county. Now, at first, I didn't really understand what was going on. I thought maybe they just needed more information. I said, listen, I understand you've probably heard about the fact I went to prison, but let me tell you how I run my company. So I went through the whole story about how I changed my life. I invited them in. You can check my taxes. You can check my credit. You can check with my suppliers. You can check with my customers. We run a very clean operation. When I finished my story, he says, well, that's a very nice story, Mr. Long, but we're going to do this the easy way or the hard way. You're not going to have a contractor's license in the county. I realized at that point this was about putting me out of business. Now keep in mind, at that point we had about 40 employees. That's 40 mortgages, right? 40 trips to the grocery store. There's a lot of people's livelihood at stake. So I realized right then that something serious is going on, and I turned to a gentleman sitting in the corner who had introduced himself as the county attorney. And I said, Mr. County Attorney, do you understand what's going on here? And the attorney says to me, yes, we're trying to protect homeowners from people with your kind of background. I said, are you kidding me? Have you heard a single thing I've said here today? This is about these guys wanting to put me out of business because we've been destroying them for the last 3 years. To the county attorney's credit, he thought maybe this was a bit of a conflict of interest, so he asked for a 30-day continuance. So during those 30 days, of course, I go out and I hire a very big-named attorney. He calls the county and says, hey, this guy's done nothing wrong. We're going to sue the county if you try to put him out of business. They settled the whole case and got rid of it. Well, keep in mind that they said if they couldn't do it the easy way, they would do it the hard way. So a few days later, I get a phone call from a reporter at our local newspaper who had decided to do a story on whether or not I should be allowed to have a contractor's license given the fact that I had been to prison. So I go out a couple of mornings later and I get our morning newspaper. The headline on the front page above the fold, ex-con's life in the balance. And they have a 6-inch by 4-inch 20-year-old mugshot of me on the front of the newspaper. You open the newspaper, they go into detail about everything I've ever done, and they had a little box, a little inset box with a quick overview of my criminal record. That was their plan to try to do it the hard way. So the reality is it didn't stop us. All it did was serve as grist for the mill. But here's the point. For the next 2 or 3 years, every time we went on a sales lead, if one of our competitors had been there, a picture of my mugshot with my criminal record would be on the kitchen table. That was their marketing plan. That was their plan to try to beat us. So what do? Obviously, it's a perceived weakness. I trained my salespeople how to tell my story. We would begin our sales presentation by saying something like, Let me tell you the story of the guy that started our company. Then they would tell my story from our perspective in total context. And of course, it was a much different story than what they were telling. My point is this: you cannot allow your competitors or marketplace gossip to tell your story. You have to tell your story. You have to proactively position any potential weakness before your prospect or your competitors bring it up. Consumers can have a lot of questions about quality, warranties, the company, and price. But what they're really trying to do is to evaluate the amount of risk of making the wrong purchasing decision. The higher the risk, the more difficult it becomes for them to say yes. The lower the risk, the easier it becomes for them to say yes. So minimizing risk is one of the keys to earning more business and selling at better margins. Think about it this way. Imagine you go to Walmart to buy a flashlight. You're sitting there in the aisle, and there's a flashlight, 15 bucks. You pick it up, you buy it, you take it home. When you get home, you just don't like the flashlight, or it doesn't work the way you wanted it to. You take it back to Walmart, and what does Walmart do? They give your money back, or they give you a new one. So the reality is there's zero risk of purchasing that flashlight. I mean, when you're there in the aisle looking at it, you don't have to think much about it, because you know if you don't like it, you can return it. Now imagine this scenario. Suppose that flashlight was $150, and right there on the shelf said, all sales are final, no refunds, and no exchanges. Did it just become harder to buy that flashlight? Absolutely, because now there's a lot of risk. If you don't like the flashlight, you waste 150 bucks because you're stuck with it. So as you're sitting there in the aisle, you start thinking things like, maybe I should go see what the Home Depot has. Maybe I should go see what Costco has. In other words, I'm now thinking about competitive bids because I'm not sure I can take the risk right here on the spot. Maybe I start thinking, maybe I better think about this. I better sleep on this. This is a big $150 decision. Does that sound familiar? Yes, it's the conversations many of your prospects are having because they perceive high risk in buying from you. So the key to success, the key to higher margins and a higher closing rate, you have to minimize risk so it's easier for your prospects to say yes. So when your prospect perceives high risk, it makes them question where else they could get your product cheaper and whether they really need the product at all. With a bigger ticket item or purchase, the consequences of making the wrong decision can be extremely severe. The higher the risk, the more difficult the purchasing decision becomes. What if you could minimize the risk for your prospects? Imagine what your sales numbers would look like if your prospect perceived zero risk in buying from you. With the consistency selling method, there are 3 simple ways we're going to discuss that will minimize risk for your prospects, which will make it easier for them to say yes. Number 1, we're going to use your company's guarantees and our warranties. Number 2, we're going to use a signature story as the foundation of your sales process. And number 3, we're going to build high levels of trust through high character and high competency. Now we're on to step 3. We're going to discuss how your company's guarantees are designed to minimize risk for your customers. Many companies offer some type of risk reversal guarantee that is specifically designed to minimize or completely eliminate any perceived risk. Use whatever standard guarantees your industry and company has in place. If you're in a position to influence or shape your company's guarantee policies, risk reversal guarantees and risk minimizing guarantees are powerful ways to minimize risk and drive sales through the roof. Now, I can hear many of you out there right now saying, money back guarantee, that's going to put us out of business. But listen, here's the reality. Most customers don't want their money back. They just want the product or service to work as advertised. Imagine this scenario. You go install some type of windows for your customer, or you sell them a product, and the product doesn't work as advertised. You try to fix it, you send out your technicians, you send out your experts, engineers, whatever it is, but you just can't fix it. It doesn't work right. Even to your standards, it's not operating properly. At some point, after a couple of months, the customer says, hey, you just need to give me my money back and take your product back because it's just not working. And if you don't take it back, I'm going to file a lawsuit, I'm going to go on social media, I'm going to call the BBB. What do you do at that point? You've tried everything to make it work properly. Listen, in that situation, you probably just give the money back and be over the situation. And that's about the only time you would ever have to refund money anyway. You just got to put your customers in a situation that if they have that kind of experience, they know that the risk is on your shoulders, not on their shoulders. When you minimize that risk, you make it easier for them to say yes to your company. So in my first company, we had a very solid risk reversal policy. In fact, our selling proposition was 100% right are 100% free. Basically, what we offered our customers is that if we install a heating and air conditioning system in your home, and anytime during the first year that you don't like it, it's not operating properly, it's not cooling or heating, and we can't fix it, we will buy it back at 100% of the initial investment. I used to always tell my customers, hey, if you can return a flashlight to Walmart, why can't you return your heating and air conditioning system to the contractor if it doesn't work right? Why should it be your problem if it doesn't work right? That strategy was very, very effective. I remember one time we installed a very high efficiency system for a customer. And about 8 months after the installation, she called me up. Her name was Sarah Parker. I'll never forget this conversation. She calls me up and she says, Mr. Long, I need you to come back out to the house and remove that very expensive system under your guarantee and install the cheapest system that you have. Well, I said, Sarah, what's wrong with the system? She said, there's nothing wrong with the system, but unfortunately, she had been diagnosed with cancer. As a result, she had to leave her job to go to treatment. She needed to sell her house to raise as much money as she could. It was a very serious situation and turned her life upside down. Well, when I understood the situation, when she explained it to me, I did the thing that I thought was the only right thing I could do. And that is I refunded her the difference, but I allowed her to keep the high efficiency system. I knew that would help it make it easier to sell her home. Well, she sold her home and everything worked out fine for her. But a few months later, I got this amazing letter from her talking about what we did. Now, I have business owners oftentimes will say, well, I can't afford to take that kind of risk. I can't afford just to give money back. Let me tell you something. That decision was worth $20 million to me because that letter from Sarah Parker became the foundation of my company. If I would refund money to a customer because they got sick, what does that say about how I'll take care of you if there's a problem with your system? So that signature story was a powerful way to minimize the risk and, again, make it easier for my customers to say yes to me. So minimizing risk is a market-dominating strategy. Your risk reversal guarantee must be evaluated in the context of increasing sales volume and margins. Then you simply take a small part of each sale and put it into what I call a warranty reserve account. Even refunding money works to your benefit because refunding a customer will be the most powerful and effective marketing dollars that you'll ever spend.